Hello everyone, this is Andrew from Crown Academy of English. Today's lesson is about the correct pronunciation of ED. So, there are many words in English that end in the letters ED. For example, regular verbs in the past simple form. Example, Mark walked to the office. So here we have the ED ending in the past simple. We also have the past participles of regular verbs. Example, Mark has cleaned his teeth. So this is the present perfect tense, and this is the past participle of clean. And finally, there are certain adjectives which end in ed. Jane is bored, for example. So, as you can see, the ed ending is very common in English, and so it's very important to know how to pronounce it. And in fact, there are three different ways to pronounce the ending ed, and that is why this lesson is so important, because there are three different ways. The first one is the sound d. Advised, advised. The second way is the t sound. Kissed, kissed. And the third way is id. Wanted, wanted. So you can see the spelling is always the same, ed, but there were three different ways of pronouncing it: advised, kissed, wanted. So what are the rules? We have three different ways, but how do we know which is the correct way? Well, the rules, the pronunciation of the ed ending depends on the final sound of the base form of the verb. Okay? And that's what we're going to look at now. So let's look at the detailed rules for choosing the correct way to pronounce it. So, the pronunciation of ed as d. We do this when the base form ends in a vowel sound or a diphthong sound, or when the base form ends in a voiced consonant sound, except the d sound. Okay? Don't worry, we're going to look at lots of examples in a second. Just wait a few seconds and I'll give you some examples. The rule for when we pronounce it as a t sound, we do this when the base form ends in an unvoiced consonant sound, except the t sound. And finally, we pronounce it id when the base form ends in the d or t sound. Okay? So that is why it's an exception here. It's an exception here and here, because there is a separate rule for those sounds. So let's look at each one in detail with lots of examples. So let's start with this. So, if the base form of the verb ends in a vowel sound or a diphthong sound, then the pronunciation of ed is d. So, the base form, example. The verb brew in the base form. Listen to the pronunciation. Brew. It ends in a vowel sound. Therefore, the pronunciation of the ed form will end in d. Brewed. Brewed. So you can see the last sound in the ed form is this. Brewed. So this is the rule. If the base form ends in a vowel sound or a diphthong sound, then the sound of ed is, the pronunciation is d. D. Carry. Carried. Free. Freed. Lie. Lied. Play. Played. Snow. Snowed. Try. Tried. And it's all one syllable. This it is the same syllable. Okay, we do not add an extra syllable with the ending. For example, here we have one syllable, brew, and it is still one syllable, brewed, in the ed form. Okay, so here we have in blue, these are all the vowel and diphthong sounds. These are examples of the most common ones that you will find. And this is the pronunciation of the ed form. So we simply add the d sound to the base form. Also, if the base form ends in a voiced consonant sound, except the d sound, then the pronunciation of ed is also d. Okay, so what is a voiced consonant sound? A voiced consonant is a consonant sound that comes from the throat, comes from vibrations in the throat. Example, v, v. If you put your finger on your throat when you make a voiced consonant sound, you will feel your finger vibrate. Let's look at some examples. So the base form of this verb, this is the base form, advise, advise. If you put your finger on your throat and say advise, you will feel your finger vibrate because this sound comes from the throat. It is a voiced consonant. So the rule is, when it's a voiced consonant at the end, then the ed form is also pronounced d. Advised. Breathe. Breathed. Burn. Burned. Call. Called. Dive. Dived. Grab. Grabbed. Hug. Hugged. Judge. Judged. Scream. Screamed. And notice what is very important is it is the sound from the base form that is important. It is not the letter. Sometimes the letter and the sound are the same, but not always. For example, here, the last letter is a letter E, but the last sound is Z. Okay? So it's the sound that is important at the end. Another example here, the last letter is E, but the sound is J, judge. Okay? Here it's the same, but this is just a coincidence. Okay, sometimes it's the same letter and the sound, but not always. So it's important to know what the last sound of the base form is. Okay, so now let's look at the T sound. If the base form ends in an unvoiced consonant sound, except the T sound, then the pronunciation of Ed is T. Example, an unvoiced consonant sound. This does not come from the throat, it just comes from the mouth. So if you put your finger on your throat with these sounds, there will not be any vibrations. It comes from the mouth. And a good example is the F sound. Okay, so this is pronounced cough, cough. So although the last letters are GH, the sound is F, cough. And if you put your finger on your throat and say cough, you'll notice that there are no vibrations at the end of the word. It is an unvoiced consonant sound. Okay, so we have cough, coughed. Can you hear the difference? It's a T, it's a T sound. Coughed. Finish, finished. Jump, jumped. Like, liked. Miss, missed. Watch, watched. So it's a subtle difference, but there is a difference, and you can hear it is a T sound. So unvoiced consonant sound, at the end of the base form, it is a T sound in the ED form. And now the final rule. Remember earlier we had exceptions, and this is why there were exceptions, because there is a separate rule. So if the base form ends in a D or a T sound, then the pronunciation of ED is id. So let's look at the D sound first. Base form, end, end, becomes, now listen carefully, here we have one syllable, end, ended, ended. So notice this is very important. With this pronunciation, this creates an extra syllable. Ended. One syllable. Now we have 1 plus 1 syllable. 2. Ended. So let's look at the other examples. Guard, guarded. Guide, guided. Mend, mended. It's always an extra syllable. Id. Now let's look at verbs that end in a t sound. And it's the same thing. We add a syllable. Heat. Heated. Melt. Melted. Select. Selected. Start. Started. So we add an extra syllable. Okay? So there we are. And here is just the summary again. You've already seen this. This is just a reminder of the rules. So we pronounce it, we pronounce ed as d when it is after a vowel sound or a diphthong, or after a voice consonant sound, except the d sound. We pronounce it as t after an unvoiced consonant sound, again except after the t sound. And we have these two exceptions because here we have a separate rule. So after the d or t sound, then the pronunciation of ed is id, and it creates an extra syllable at the end of the word. Okay, easy, right? There we are. That's the end of the lesson. And here are some other lessons which I think you'll be interested in.